Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's so nice to see you all in good health. This morning we arranged a very, very special event together with Swiss Embassy, led by Ambassador Redding, and Swiss Korea Business Council. This event will be featured by a very special guest who is the former president of Swiss Confederation. I'm sure you all, when you hear a country named, immediately you think of something that reminds you many things. What reminds you when you hear Switzerland? For me, Swiss-made watch, precision and reliability, beautiful country and nice people, hardworking people, but reliable people, and high living standard, and all in all, a well-managed country, managed and keeping the high living standard for people, well-managing environment, transport system, energy, and communications, and all. You know, former President Doris Leuthard is now in charge of all these important the areas in Switzerland. She is currently as Minister of the Environment, Energy, Transport, and Communications. So that covers all. And so she has a lot to tell us, I'm sure. In fact, we have a lot to learn from Switzerland, and particularly in managing a country, keeping people's high living standard, and also running very, very efficient government. I wished more Korean politicians present here this morning to learn more from the Swiss experience. Well, in any case, we're very fortunate to have the Doris Leuthard to share her insights on the Swiss experiences and policies regarding environment, trade, and energy. And energy, again, in Korea is a very, very energy inefficient country. We should learn a lot from Swiss experience. So I'm very looking forward to sharing her insight. With no further ado, I would like to invite the Minister Leuthard. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you so much. Well, dear Dr. Sakong, ladies and gentlemen, it's all my pleasure and my honor being with you this morning, discussing about the world situation on energy, on the environment, on trade, and the particular situation of Switzerland and South Korea. After visiting your country with a business delegation in 2009, it's now my second time with a business delegation. Last year, your president visited Switzerland on a state visit. And since we have also this free trade agreement, I can say that the relations between Switzerland and South Korea deepened. Not only that we have much more contacts and the trade flows are growing nicely, but also a better understanding. And we share, therefore, a lot of values in common, especially also in the field of the environment. We have an environmental integrity group, which Switzerland chairs, and where South Korea plays a very crucial role, leading actually the whole Asian continent in this group. So I'm very happy to be here and share some thoughts with you in this morning. Long many decades, when we talked about energy, it was about oil and gas. Oil and gas. In every statistics on GDP, you see the oil price is quite decisive. And so for many years we had OPEC with Saudi Arabia, who played a crucial role, who also, well, was responsible of the amount of barrels of oil on the market and also on the price side. It worked roughly well. And many years, energy policy was more or less stable, and we could profit and had actually also a supply which was okay for most of the countries. Well, then we had the BRICS with increasing economics, with increasing growth, and the energy demand increased as well. So we began to understand, well, with all this growth, we also have not only economic growth, but also a huge increasing global demand on energy. Soon we heard about peak oil. Countries developed new energy resources, like, for example, Brazil developed this bioethanol. Today, it's too expensive. It's not a solution for the planet, but perhaps for Brazil it works. We had, in parallel, a beginning discussion on climate change, because all the analysis, also economic analysis, for example, from Mr. Stern, who demonstrated doing nothing about climate change, only looking at it or continuing business as usual with a lot of CO2 emissions will not save the planet. Indeed, we will have more disasters, more risks who will be realized, and this costs much more than we tackle climate change and we try to reduce our CO2 emissions. And this context, energy policy became more and more important, and politicians had to care about their energy supply, their energy demand, and always in this context of climate change. For Switzerland, this was actually something which was also important for us, because Switzerland is by 78% depending on imports of energy. And most of our imports are, like in South Korea, fossil-based. So we also have an interest to stabilize our consumption and to be less dependent on imports and to reduce our fossil fuel part of our energy mix. According to the World Energy Outlook, global demand for energy will increase by 60% by 2035. The ability to offer energy at affordable prices is a decisive factor for a modern economy, which is why improvements of energy efficiency, the expansion of renewable energies, and energy security are on the agenda of most countries all over the world. Today, 20% of the world's population consume 80% of our energy. According to IEA estimates, the 2.2 billion inhabitants of non-industrialized countries use up to 35 times less electricity than the 1.3 billion inhabitants of industrialized countries. We consume too much. And when all now the developing countries go on our path and their consumption will be in 10-15 years as high as our consumption, we will have a huge problem on this planet. So the situation is clear. We have to go down, others will come up, and in between we will have a meeting point. This is not very easy because every economy would like to grow, and economic growth so far was in line with also an increasing demand of energy. So decoupling energy and economic growth is one of the key factors to solve the problem. In Switzerland, we work since many years on this issue, and I can tell you in the last 20 years we had economic growth, and we could stabilize and even in some years reduce our energy consumption. And in line with that, we reduced our CO2 emissions. So it's possible to have economic growth, to have a good quality of life, to have perspectives for your population, and in parallel reduce your energy consumption and reduce your CO2 consumption. When we continue with these perspectives of the population, increasing world population, and the increasing energy demand, increasing CO2 emissions, our planet still will have a big problem. An increase of 32 million a year, or an increase of some more percentages a year of energy and CO2 emissions will already 2050 have a very, very big negative impact on the planet. A good example, what we are heading for, is also the car industry. In 2010, the cars on the planet reached the billion mark. Particularly in Asia, there has been a sharp increase in private car ownership. The total number of cars on the world's roads is expected to reach 1.8 billion by 2035. This is an increase of 32 million a year, or an increase of a little over a car every second. It's normal. People who have a good salary, who have a fortune, they would like to have a car in all over the world. So here, South Korea is in a specific position because with this increasing number of cars, we can't stop that. Mobility is a fact, it's a growing fact. But we can do it much more intelligent, and that's a good example what we can do. Economic growth, cars as which is the demand of the world population, but when we can have cars with fuel cells, hybrid cars, e-vehicles, so which don't use a lot of fossil energy and emit not as lot as CO2 as today's cars, we can have both. It's a win-win situation. And that's exactly what we have to do in many parts of our economy, trying to have smarter, more intelligent solutions. Your president, therefore, was very right to announce the creative economy. The creative economy is something which shows us with more creativity, with more research, with more smart systems, we can solve the challenge. We have to take steps to reduce our carbon footprint in transport, like mentioned, but also in buildings, as well as heating and cooling systems. That is why the greatest potential for reducing consumption and boosting efficiency is in these two parts. In industry as well. This is very different from country to country. You are a very industrial-oriented country, so here your potential is probably the biggest. In Switzerland, we are more a service-oriented country. Our biggest potential is in transport and in buildings. In industrial process as well, and therefore we have also here measures to undertake. Given that it is a country with few natural resources, Switzerland has been striving to make the most efficient use of our resources for a long time, for compelling reasons. We have no oil, barely any natural gas, and as I mentioned, we import around 78% of our energy. But we can make use of water, which covers around 56% of our power needs. I think you see it in the key figures on the statistics. in view of the global trends for energy demand and other research, the Swiss government drafted an agenda to increase our resource efficiency and to reduce our CO2 emissions. In order to reach this, we aim to use less fossil fuel, more renewables. We use more domestic sources, if possible, and we consume less. And we want to be very, very efficient by the use of any resource we have. 3 of our 5 nuclear plants will reach the end of their lifespan in the next 10, 15 years. And we have taken the decision not to build any new ones on the grounds of safety and also costs. Hydropower and other renewables will be the alternative. But the most important factor is efficiency. We consume about 6,300 watts a year per person. That's a lot. That's too much. And here we need to reduce consumption from an economic point of view. But there's also a geopolitical shift on the global energy map, which seems to be important. For many, many years, China was not really on the map, and the US was the biggest energy importer. So whenever there was a conflict, you have also seen the military services of the US protecting the country, but it was mainly also due to their interests on energy. Today, China and India are becoming the world's largest importers of oil and coal. The United States is able to cover its own energy needs thanks to discovery of new gas fields and fracking. Fracking made a big change all over the world, not only because we have new countries who are on the map now. Fracking also has a price situation which is a fright for Saudi Arabia and other oil and gas-based countries. That's why you have seen increasing prices up to $140 a barrel, and within 1 year it dropped down to 40, 45 US dollars a barrel. It will be interesting to see how long this will stand and what will be the price level when this is more stable. But it's many, many political interests behind this policy. So that's why in energy you have never, never, never a market price or only an economic price. It's a lot of politics behind that. And this will be also the future. We have to be aware of that. So as importing country for the moment, that's actually good news to have very low oil prices. For efficiency and for the globe, it's probably not what will save the planet. So here we have to continue, although we have for the moment a very good price level on oil, gas, petrol. We have to continue our measures towards efficiency and towards less consumption. You see in Europe also the situation with Russia and Ukraine. Europe is heavily depending on Russian gas. So here it's different when Russia has political interests and with Ukraine it's also a political interest. Then you have a big issue in Europe because the dependency on gas is quite large. So they have to also consider this fact when dealing and having discussions with Russia. For the moment, this was also one of the reasons why in Europe you've seen quite a lot of movements towards the renewable energies, because this was a potential to develop and to reduce dependency on Russian gas. This will continue. Even when it costs more than Russian gas, they will do that for a geopolitical reason, for geopolitical independency. And that's a good thing. That's actually a good thing. But it's also a very, very difficult path. Like Europe or Asia, Switzerland will remain an energy importer. Consequently, prices will be higher than in the United States, for example. The United States has an excellent position now with their low energy prices, with their fracking, and the economy is also stronger than 10 years before. It makes sense from a geostrategic point of view to focus on new technologies which can help to reduce our consumption. Asia, Europe have to continue to deploy new technologies, new efficiency technologies. Therefore, I think here the cooperation we already had and we increased during this visit, also on research, may help our countries to accept we will remain energy importers, but we can do it smarter, we can do it with a lot of new technologies, and because there's a worldwide demand on these technologies, that's also a very important business we can deploy. High-tech and traditional industries will benefit of all these eco-friendly energy technologies. As far as efficiency in buildings, public transport and industry are concerned, Switzerland is among the leading nations in innovation and competitiveness according to various performance indexes, rankings, especially in this clean tech sector. We have many companies who offer these technologies already today. This excellent performance has been made possible most to our excellent researchers in industry, in academic institutions, and thanks to the financial support of the Swiss government. We spend a lot on R&D, and we try that we don't have only a lot of patents, but a lot of commercialized products on the market. Korea is also one of the leading nations in terms of R&D and innovation. That is why it is one of Switzerland's 7 non-European priority countries for cooperation in education, research and innovation. And this cooperation pays dividends. Thanks to Korean-Swiss Science and Technology Program, 37 joint research projects were supported up until 2012. Those involved include the 2 Swiss Federal Institutes of Technology, 2 research institutes in Switzerland, one for material, one for water, 3 universities, a university hospital, and a further higher education institution. All these work together with Korean institutions and bring together the best researchers, the best talents of the world to solve these mentioned problems, to look for efficiency solutions. Other joint R&D projects are conducted by the Korea Institute for Advanced Technology, the Swiss State Secretariat for Education, Research and Innovation, and the Commission for Technology and Innovation. Last year, during the visit of your president, we signed 2 additional memorandums of understanding in the BITS to Energy Lab and the cybersecurity aspects in smart grids. 2 new projects we have together. In terms of energy supply, ladies and gentlemen, conditions are likely to continue changing the future. That requires flexibility in politics, flexibility in business and in research. We need answers to a host of difficult questions. How do we put in place incentives to save energy and to reduce consumption, particularly in societies when energy remains so cheap? How can we divert the worldwide over $540 billion in fossil fuel subsidies? That's huge subsidies. How can we improve energy storage and minimize transmission losses? How can increasing mobility, particularly in megacities, be achieved using less energy, less space, and lower emissions? I don't have all the answers to this. I have an idea. Researchers have an idea. But politicians need, at the end of the day, solutions. And that's why these are very difficult questions, and not in every country the answer is the same. But we will need here research showing us what can lead in this direction and what can be also marketable in a couple of years. Because we need them in 5-10 years, that we can prepare and that we can also, as politicians, have in place the adequate regulation. We have two main goals to achieve, regardless of short-term economic wishes, regardless to the current state of the economy, regardless of whether we are talking about industrial, emerging, or developing countries. Firstly, the share of fossil fuels must be brought down because these resources are finite and because many people on this planet are consuming ever more energy. Secondly, global warming must be contained. The time for grand declarations is over. What we need is action. And that brings me to the climate agreement, which has to be signed at the UN Climate Change Conference in Paris in December this year. A reduction in greenhouse gas emissions is in everybody's interest, industrialized countries as well as emerging and developing countries. All countries have to do their part to reduce emissions and assume their share of responsibility. The measures will take different forms in different countries, depending on the energy and power mix, depending on their status of development and the polluter. But every country is responsible for taking the appropriate measures to adapt and to reduce emissions. Switzerland is playing an active role to reduce greenhouse gases, and we are playing our part towards the internationally recognized 2 degrees Celsius goal. We signed Kyoto I, we signed Kyoto II, so for many years we tried to put adequate measures within Switzerland and to change our economy towards a greener economy. Our per capita emissions are now only about 5.3 tons. It's roughly half of your emissions. So you have a potential, you can improve, and also we still can improve. Switzerland was the first country to announce its ambitious intended nationally determined contribution, INDC. We did it because we knew other countries will follow. Europe followed, the US followed, we have China, we have now also South Korea, which I'm very grateful for. So it's important to see now in summer the major countries having their national determined goal, that we can talk about that and that we can continue with the process. It will be very important, and therefore I would like to congratulate the Republic of Korea that every country submits its INDC. The communication of this contribution early before Paris is an important signal that the countries of the Environmental Integrity Group are committed to doing their fair share. Let me furthermore compliment the Republic of Korea on its contribution to the Green Climate Fund, which is hosted here in South Korea. You also took over their financial responsibility with $100 million US, just like Switzerland. Thank you also for launching your emission trading system on 1st January of this year by the Ministry of Environment. That's a very important program. It's the first nationwide cap-and-trade program in Asia, and it's the second largest emission trading scheme in the world. And we in Europe are looking very closely to this scheme because it's very smartly made, and we hope that also the European trading scheme can afterwards adapt it to the Korean expertise. It's an economic approach. It's an approach which can help also the heavy industry to take over a part, but also remain competitive at the same time. Paris, ladies and gentlemen, will not be the end of the procedure. Paris must herald the start of a new understanding for a new agreement among states with regular checks to ensure that the promised measures are actually implemented and work. Then we will actually be successful in steering the population of the planet towards the 2 degrees Celsius path. When our German neighbors speak of Industry 4.0, they mean the high-tech strategy to advance computerization in business. I believe we should go a step further and speak of an Infrastructure 4.0 strategy. It is vital that information and communication technologies, ICT, are incorporated into energy production, transmission and consumption at all levels. From the electricity meter in the home to power station turbines, every part of the network must be embedded in a common system. It is equally important that networked ICTs are used in economic processes and transport. Only then can we effectively achieve a global reduction in emissions and put a stop to the ever-growing waste of resources and the excessively large ecological footprint. Then we can reduce the burden on our planet to a reasonable level. In order to encourage the global restructuring of the energy sector away from fossil fuels to greater efficiency and renewable energies, there needs to be a global, joined-up approach in business, in technology, and among the international community. South Korea, which is ahead of many other countries in this area, could play a leading role. Switzerland is interested in comprehensive, multimodal approaches to modernizing infrastructure, and we are very open to cooperate with you on the role of ICT to really play a major role and help us steering the planet in this direction. The benefits of more intensive international cooperation in the field of electronics and technology, therefore, seem to me very clear. They could bring about worldwide solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our job to help cultivate innovation and ensure that the best and brightest ideas do not remain within the boundaries. We must make sure we invest in the next generation of cutting-edge technologies and lead the way in smart networks, because today's innovative technologies will shape our future. Therefore, I thank very much for your attention, thank very much for the cooperation, and that we not only talk about the problems, that we find together solutions with our technologies, with our researchers, with our companies, with our societies. I wish you good luck.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your illuminating views and insights with us, particularly regarding the energy. I would like to draw your attention on this, the statistics which is distributed on your table. You know, I cannot help emphasize this fact. Look at the bottom 5, the row, energy demand per capita and electricity demand per capita and CO2 emissions per capita and energy demand for GDP. You compare Korea with Switzerland. Energy demand per capita, Korea is almost twice as high, and then electricity demand per capita is again quite almost two-thirds higher than the two-thirds, and CO2 emission per capita is more than 2 times, and energy demand per GDP is about 4 times. Of course, Korean industrial structure is different. Swiss is more service-oriented. Even if you take into consideration, I'm very sure that energy is more inefficient. As compared to Japan, again, our energy efficiency is much lower. So here, I think, in the short run, in the long run, we have to move to toward renewable energy and the other energy sources. But in the meantime, I've been maintaining for some time now, we have to set the relative price structure right so that we can be more conscious about energy efficiency. As long as you keep energy price cheap, people will consume more. So people cannot have cake and eat it too. You know, you have to sacrifice something. So I think this is a very, very critical issue. And electricity and again, you know, energy, other gasoline. I think we really have to give serious thought to this. And given the fact that we are very energy inefficient country. Well, with this, let me invite some of the comments and questions to the presentation. Yes, please. Please tell us who you are and then.
I'm a journalist from the Joseon News Press media here in Korea. I have two quick questions to the Minister of Doris Loy III. The first question is about you've mentioned about the efficiency, doing things to making a smarter way to consume energies. Therefore, efficiency is a key factor for the nuclear power plant. Those who are supporting nuclear power plant is the most efficient energy power plant itself. Their disposal of the spent fuel, the size of amount compared to coal plant, it's really small. And then while it's in functioning, it doesn't make any emissions itself. Therefore, it's a very efficient, known to be that. But in Swiss, as you mentioned, it's not closing those, currently using the power plants and then not plan to make any new ones. But therefore, I have asking that question about that in terms of efficiency. Is it killing this project for expanding this nuclear power plant is a good decision in terms of efficiency? And the second question is about the electric vehicles. As you mentioned, the electric vehicles are in part of reducing these carbon emissions. However, electric vehicle itself, looking at them, they don't make any zero emissions by itself, but they consume electricity. And those electricities are coming from the coal plants or nuclear power plants, any power plants. Therefore, some of the experts mentioned about overall use of this electricity will be the equalizing, will be same. And the same amount or the probably similar amount of the emission will come from, not directly from the vehicle itself, but coming from the power plant. So what would be the solution, or what would you suggest? Thank you.
I answer directly. Thank you for the question. Well, in Switzerland, we don't have coal. So in our energy mix, you have a little bit of gas, about 13%, but this is mainly for cooking, heating, but we don't have coal. On nuclear plants, you are right, it's quite efficient, and so far the costs have been quite low, also the overall costs. But when you have new nuclear plants, due to the safety standards, the costs per plant and so also per kilowatt hour are much higher than 20 years ago. You see also in Finland, which is our current having a new nuclear plant. You see in UK, they decided for a new nuclear plant, they have to give subsidies, 16 cents of 33 years. So this was not our perspective. That's why when you see renewables are coming down and having a grid parity, in the US they already reached grid parity. That's the biggest solar market for the moment. China will follow. And in Switzerland, we have hydropower as our main source for electricity. That's why we can make a change, but it's possible that we will also see some more imports from Europe in Switzerland, because Europe has an overcapacity on electricity. So we have a grid system which is very interconnected, and here lies also something which will help us. So efficiency for us is more also on the renewables and on hydropower. But you are totally right, it will never be coal. And that's why you have actually making an overall analysis, putting in place all costs, also on car costs, from the production of a car until you give it back. I think also with the traditional engines, you have also development. And on overall, cyclic analysis is for the moment in Europe that biodiesel cars are the most eco-friendly cars for the moment. So electric cars have batteries which have to be improved, which are also at higher costs than perhaps in 10 years. I think the fuel cells, therefore, are really a very promising alternative. And we have the occasion to look yesterday at the research center, and I think this could be an additional alternative to help us reduce fossil fuel, reduce CO2, and having a methodology which could also, on overall cost, be very attractive. So I think we will see different models, different technologies, and I think that's good. So every country can have his choice, and every consumer can have his choice, because not everybody has long distances every way. In Switzerland, we prefer for longer distances the train, railway, and that's even more efficient than the individual motorized vehicle. So I think we are always pragmatic in Switzerland, and don't think that's the solution. So we will have various solutions, and then the consumer has a choice, and every country can make a choice. I think we have to head for a broader approach.
Thank you. Yes, Professor Hong, please.
Thank you. I have two questions. You just have mentioned on Paris conference coming December. What do you expect? Any feasible resolution at this conference? We know last November between President Obama and Xi Jinping has agreed to open of their ceilings in the coming future. And include this subject. Do you think we can have some kind of fruitful resolution at Paris conference in the coming? My second question is about you have some delicate situation, gas import from Russia several years ago, and by chance shale revolution in U.S. is rising so rapidly, and there comes some of export from U.S. to of crude oil, include gas, and do you think some of alternate transferring from Russian gas to some other places like U.S. To Europe will be visualized sometimes in the future? These two questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. I was very skeptic about the climate negotiations until last November, I must say, because I've been at conferences and there was not a big result, and not economy had always priority, growth had priority, and the environment was, yes, everybody, also G20 made a lot of declarations, and it did not happen a lot. Since last year, when Ban Ki-moon made the UN conference on climate change, I must say, many involvement of the business area, many projects on green freight initiatives, to a lot of initiatives from the private sector. And then came this US-China agreement. And this is, in my view, something which is very, very important. This is, in my view, a breakthrough. Because China was, as well as the US, have always been very tough, and they did not wanted to have a concrete target. They always wanted to say, yeah, we do something at home, but we don't like targets. And they did it. Well, I never go and criticize a country that target is insufficient. I say it to the minister, but not in public. And therefore, I think they made a step ahead. They are the biggest emitters of the world, so others will follow. I'm sure the political pressure now is much higher. And it showed also, we don't want that in 2020, 2025, every country already has a high target. The procedure is important, that it allows you to have economic growth among in line with your situation at home, but you contribute. Every country has to contribute, and that this will be the big success of Paris, in my view, that we have for the first time of the international community an internationally binding commitment. At different levels, with different velocities, but everybody takes over responsibility. And this is, in my view, a big success. And then we have to define what comes after Paris, how we handle these INDCs, how we found a way to assess regularly these INDCs. We are used to that from the OECD. On economic development, we have regular assessments and also recommendations from the experts. And for me, such a system would be also a good way to deal with climate change, and that we have with every country a discussion, a dialogue, what fits, what does not fit, what measures are effective, what is a stop-and-go policy, and I think this could be really a breakthrough. Therefore, I'm hopeful for Paris. Together with the US, Switzerland worked very hard also to find a financial architecture, how we can measure the private sector activities and how they can contribute. Because, you know, after 2020, we have to finance $100 billion a year, and the public sector cannot shoulder all this money themselves. So we need also the private sector coming in. And when green economy is all over the world agreed, so actually it's nothing else, nothing special you do anyway in business, but a little bit with less consumption of resources, with less CO2, and then we can change the world.
Okay. Dr. Lee, please. Yes.
You showed clear comparison of CO2 emission per capita between Switzerland and Korea. And reading this, I envy the international environment of Switzerland. For example, we have China direct to Korea in only a couple of 100-kilometer distance. China is now constructing nuclear plant along with the Chinese East Coast that is direct to the Korean West Coast. More than 40 nuclear plants that will be completed until 2020. And more nuclear sites are planned. And if one of the nuclear plants comes to a problem, the problem will be Korea will be the most highly stricken country in the world, because we are every year we are suffering from the miscellaneous dust wind from China. So if this dust wind is combined with nuclear dust, it will be disastrous. And this kind of problem cannot be solved by bilateral talks. And how can international agency or international multilateral talks can solve this kind of problem and prevent for the emergency?
I'm from the Diplomacy magazine. Welcome to Korea.
Thank you. So
May I know what is your achievements as President of Switzerland? In brief.
Okay, that's the best question I ever heard.
Well, I understand your concerns about the very close nuclear plants of China, but I understand also China for their energy demand and their dependency. I understand fully that they also head for new nuclear plants. The difficulty is probably that's the best location for them nearest the sea. So I think what you should look for, we have the International Atomic Organization in Vienna. And here we have experts, and you have the right, I think South Korea is also a member, you have the right on regular controls about safety standards. They make reports, they make analyses, and perhaps, I think they could even publish these reports. Switzerland is one of the countries who think the EIEA should have more transparency and publish the reports they're doing on each nuclear plant. So far, only the government receives the reports, and it's a secret. And I think it would help neighbors and others when we have in general a policy of transparency and that we see, okay, no, it's fine. That's also very helpful for governments towards their own citizens to say there's a control, or international independent experts went there and had a look and they are coming to a positive report. And I think this should be something you should also promote. You have several countries in Europe, you have the same assessment. We have to accept every country's decision, but they have to give us a guarantee that they follow the rules of standardization, the rules of the best available safety, and we need independent experts who give us the guarantee they follow also what they promise.
Yeah, I think this, the question raised by Dr. Lee was very relevant and important for us, and it's very interesting and need to be emphasized, and that is to make IAEA's report more transparent and have a report on each project. I think that's a very good idea, and then maybe Korea should work hard to push for it. Yes, I think that is very good, because the nuclear generation is efficient, also can be the environment friendly, as long as it can prevent any disaster. So
yes.
I think this is very important. And Korea, as of now, we relies quite heavily on the nuclear energy, but we also have problem in building new ones, and for many reasons. But I think as long as we have technology and transparent assessment, I think is one alternative to seriously think about. And then how about what have you achieved as president?
Well, you have to ask the Swiss politicians or the Swiss population. You know, in Switzerland we have a rotation on the presidency. We have 7 members in the government. One of us is the vice president and the president, and every year we rotate. So next year I will probably be again the vice president, and then so we are all together the government, all together head of states. And so we try to do our best, yes. But as all politicians, we are criticized. We don't always make the best things, but that's normal, and we live with that. And among statistics, Switzerland is still running good, and therefore I think our job must be quite good, and I'm paid for that.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very valuable information. And just I have two comments or questions. I'm not sure. First one is, to achieve sustainable development or climate change target or whatever, there are three different kinds of driving forces. Normally, we are saying government or NGOs or society. The final one is the business. Which sector is the most powerful driving force to achieve this kind of objectives? That's the first one. The second one is, you said, your country targets, INDC target, already announced. But in the case of Korea, already just a couple of days ago, we announced again. But the process is very complicated. I mean, from private sector, I mean, the business sector is still very complain on that. But the NGOs has their own views. How to harmonize and make the conclusion through communications. You are in charge of communication sector. Okay, so that's my point in two questions from your experience. Thank you.
Well, Switzerland, we are used to direct democracy, and we have a huge integration of the civil society, of NGOs, of business people, until we have political decisions. And I think that I feel very well with this system, because we have steadily discussions, we are also criticized by NGOs not being too ambitious with our INDC. Others think we are crazy or we are going too far with our INDC, but that's a permanent discussion. And we have also consultations, we tell it. So when the government has a proposal, it brings it for 3 months in a consultation. Every citizen has the right to give his own personal opinion. And then we look if there's one good idea also among these consultations, or some critical points we think, okay, yeah, that's an argument, we did not consider it enough. And then we adjust our targets or our policy and then bring it to Parliament. So, and in Parliament again, you have many groups of interests. So it takes time, this procedure. Direct democracy in Switzerland is a long process, but normally you get a very smart result, because it's a compromise. It's a compromise, and not one party or not one interest is considered much more important than the other. And this gives us stability and normally quite a high acceptance of these proposals.
Okay. Are there any more questions or comments? Well, I think we can go on all day, but we have to let the secretary go. It was very fruitful, and you provided the many fruitful thoughts, particularly for us in the energy and the climate change area. And also, it is very important to have social consensus on these issues. So the way of communicating among people, particularly between people and the government and people, I think this communication is very important. So Mr. Lim asked you what was your most important achievement. I think she was able to communicate with people, so she could persuade people to implement what's desirable the policies. So I think, so as I said at the beginning, Swiss remind us of many things, precision and the reliability, which are very high universal value, but well managed the country. I think that is a very important thing. And we not only have to learn from you on the policies and technologies, but I think we have to learn from you how to manage country. So please come to Korea more often and advise Korean government and Korean politicians in particular, so that we can run the country better and make this place the best place to live in the world. Okay, with this we have to end, and please join me again thanking the Doris.
Thank you.